Hi, everyone. It's Katie with Meeting Tomorrow. We're a nationwide event production company that produces in-person, virtual, and hybrid events in every city in the country. I'm an event project manager, and I'm here to review what a hybrid run of show is, along with our top tips for creating one. So this course is going to span across 3 different modules. Part 1, which is this one, will review what a hybrid run of show is and why you should create one, plus what information you need before you even get started, followed by the basics of a hybrid run a show. Part 2, I'm going to walk us through a step-by-step demo of how to create a hybrid run a show, and part 3 will cover what separates a good from a great hybrid run a show. So let's get started. So what is a run a show really, and why should you even create one? So a run a show, you can think of it as like a step-by-step detailed outline of the client's public-facing agenda that includes those behind-the-scenes type of details of what's happening at a specific time and by whom. You might also hear this referred to as a show flow or a cue to cue. So normally, if you're already working with a production company, they create this for you. And this is something we do here at Meeting Tomorrow. But if you're going to DIY, you should create a run a show anytime you're working on a really complex event that has many moving parts. So this could be something like a multi-day event, something with a lot of like concurrent breakout sessions, many speakers. Whereas some shows that are simpler, maybe they're only like a couple hours long. There's few presenters, not a lot of transitions are happening. A run a show may not really be needed. Now, it's really important to know what information you need before you even get started. The last thing you want to do is just spend hours, building the run a show and trying to fill in stuff and make assumptions when really you just need a chance to get more information from your client. So before you step into creating a run a show, look back and really see what information you have. Make sure you have a good, clear understanding of the event scope. Do you have enough of a detailed agenda to even get started? So if you're missing main things like the session titles or like what time everything is happening and like the list of the presenters, that's something you probably want to collect before you even get started. Knowing your audience, that's also really important. So in a hybrid event, you're going to have both in-person and virtual attendees. So you need to have a good understanding of how each side of the hybrid event is going to work. Engagement is important, and you want to make sure that your remote attendees do not feel attached at all during the event. Q&A and polls, those are common engagement tools. So make sure your client knows how to incorporate both audiences when you're using them. And you also want to think about, who is really looking at the run a show once it's created. Who are your stakeholders? How will each person or department really be utilizing the run a show during the event? Almost like 100% of the time, you're not creating the run a show for yourself. You're really creating it for your entire team that's involved to follow line by line on show day. So this isn't like a full comprehensive list, but here's like some examples. So think of your technical director. So this person really leads the on-site crew, and they should have a deep understanding of the event scope. So having things like a notes column could be really handy that maybe they fill in pre-show or even, in real time that could be useful for them. Maybe you have a venue point of contact. So sometimes, depending on the venue, you have already been working with like an event manager there or just some main point person. And so for them, they might need like a slimmed down version of a run a show with information that's only relevant to them. And then sometimes your client. So use your best judgment. You obviously know your client the best. But if you decide to share the run a show with them, you want to make sure you save a different version for them. That's removing like internal information if you have crew contact phones and emails and stuff like that on there. And then one other thing I do want to point out about a hybrid run a show is to really make sure it's legible and easy to read when you print it. So, when you're building the run a show, it's really easy to, scroll up and down, to the left and to the right. But if your technical director decides they want to print something off as like a hard copy and bring it on site, you don't want to have those extra, columns spilling off to a new page. So that's something to keep in mind. And really, you want to remember that your run a show is like a living, breathing document, and it's going to have changes even up to event day, probably sometimes even on event day on the fly. You never know what could happen in events. So before we get started into the demo, the last thing I wanted to cover in this portion is kind of just the basics of a hybrid run of show. So the idea is pretty simple. Just how can you merge what happens at like the host location with what's happening virtually so that both the in-person and the remote parties understand the sequence of events to put on a successful show. So when you're creating a hybrid run of show, start with what you're comfortable with, whether that's from a virtual perspective. Maybe you started in events kind of during the pandemic and that's what you're used to, or maybe you've been doing event planning for a long time and in person is really, kind of where you shine and you had to learn what the virtual aspects were with the pandemic. So start with what you're comfortable with and then add on from the other side as you get going. So for our template specifically that we use here at Meeting Tomorrow, we recommend having at least 3 tabs. So those are a contact list, an event overview, and then of course the run of show itself. So the contact list includes stakeholder names, contact information, roles, presenter links, stuff like that. And then the event overview can kind of include information like what virtual platform are you using, what is the attendee login information, still having crew contact information both for in-person and for virtual. Maybe, a link to the post deliverables, like where are we uploading all of those recordings. Information like that, that's really helpful and consolidated in one area for your team. And then the last tab is the run of show itself, of course, the meat and potatoes of the whole document. So make sure you tune into part 2 of the course, and I will see you over there.